So we've made it to the big review for the test. And we have a list here of the concepts. So I would be happy to do any problem that's on this list. For example, this kind is like the careful test I've described it as. Finding the x and the y intercepts. Notice they say f of x equals 0. Do you get that's y equals 0? And f of 0, that's where x equals 0. All right. I think we should do one of those. So I'm going to, even though you haven't asked, I'm going to do one of those right now. So we're going to go off to the side, and I'd like you to find if f of x is negative x squared minus an x. That's as complicated as I can make it in that it's got multiple negatives. And then I want f of x plus h minus f of x. That is the careful test. Let's see if you can pull off what is that answer. And then this is a separate question now. Separately, what's f of 0? And that's actually really easy. But what's the other one? Looks weirder. Make it in a different color. What if f of x is 0? Then what do you get? Those are boxing them off because they're different questions. So the first thing I want you to answer is this. I'll call this A. This is part B of the question. Find f of 0 and f of x equals 0. All right, I'm going to pause while you give a chance to try those. Oh, let's see how you did. I know some of you didn't get a chance to share with the kid next to you, but a lot of people are still finishing. So I'll write this out. I'm going to put in negative parentheses squared minus parentheses. I just took this and I made it have empty parentheses where the x was. Now I'm going to drop in the x plus h. And I'm going to drop in the other x plus h. Okay, now I need to subtract off the f of x. So I'm going to go minus, I'll do this in a different color, minus the f of x. F of x is all of this, and it needs parentheses. I bet if some of you forgot the parentheses right here, then you would have messed up the distributing. And now, negative in the front, and I got to do all of this part first, and it's x squared plus 2hx plus h squared. And then I have minus x and minus h. And then plus x squared plus x. There. Now, I got to distribute this negative. Negative x squared minus 2hx, or xh, wouldn't matter, minus h squared minus x minus h plus x squared plus x. Whew! So many steps. Final answer, negative x squared plus x squared. They cancel. Minus x plus x. They cancel. So I'm going to put the negative h squared first because you usually put the thing with the biggest degree first. Minus 2hx. If you reverse those two, it would have been fine. Minus h at the end. It had only h's. Who passed the careful test? Nice. Okay. Now, what if you needed to find f of 0? Super simple. Just stick in x is 0. That's the x spot. So x is 0, so you put a 0 here and a 0 here, and it's just 0. Right? Okay, good. How about f of x is 0? That means this is 0. I'm going to rewrite it. 0 is negative x squared minus an x. Can I solve that? Yes, you can, by factoring. X comes out, negative x minus 1. If you can factor it, you should. See, that's the key there, is they both had an x, so I take it out. Now, there's two answers. Either x equals 0 for that front one right here, or if x equaled negative 1, then this part right here would turn into 0. Think about it. If you put in a regular 1, you'd have negative 1 minus 1, which would be negative 2. So you can't put in a regular 1. It had to be a negative 1. Oh, so many little places to mess up with negatives. So there's two answers for that one. X equals 0 and x equals negative 1. Any questions on that one? Okay, that was complicated stuff. Now let's get back to our list. Are there any of these that you'd like to do? Well, I think what I realized last hour was that people were asking the questions that were just on the following slides. So how about if I just do the following slides, and then if you don't get your question answered by the end, you can ask it. I for sure will build in time for you to ask an individual question. Everybody go to the orange slide that looks like this. Give it a try. I'll pause for a second while you give that a try. Okay, Dice of Destiny. Row 1. Person 2. That's you, Nikki. Tell me what you did with the stuff underneath the root.
So I did plus 12 is greater than 4 plus 0.
Perfect. So x is greater than or equal to negative 12. Who knew that that was part of the answer? Good. I'm drawing a line. I'm putting negative 12, and I'm making it filled in because it says or equal to. Max, do you know what to do with the bottom part?
You don't want that to be below, you don't want that to be 0.
You're right, you don't want it to be 0. So I'm going to write that out and go x squared minus 121 should not equal 0. I'm guessing you didn't catch that that was a factoring problem. It's one of those top 20 things. If you can factor it, you should. X minus 11, x plus 11. How many of you caught that? That was a factorable thing. Okay, so that's one of those reasons that the top 20 is so huge. So this has got two parts to the answer then. Negative 11 and positive 11 would cause the bottom to be 0. So here's where negative 11 lives. And here's where positive 11 lives. And it can't be either of those two. Okay, so now I've got to get all of this merged into one thing. And this one was also a greater than. Max, do you know which way to shade then? Yes, I think. I'm backwards from you, but did you mean this way? Okay, good. All right, there we go. And there is your answer. Yes?
Why wouldn't the bottom be x, has to be greater than plus or minus 11?
Because if you put in numbers that are bigger than 11, it's fine. It's about the bottom becoming 0. You want the bottom to not be 0. Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, can you shut the door on the way out? Loud out there. All right. So that one came down to a couple of rules. You set the bottom not equal to 0. You set the stuff under the root to be greater than or equal to 0. And then if you can factor it, you should. All right. So I think that's enough for that one. Let's move on. This is the one we just did. It's kind of basically the careful test all over again, so I don't want to waste time on that. Yes?
For that last question, would you just have to write on the number line? Would you have to write
Number line would be just fine. You can leave it as an underline. Unless the problem specifically says you must do it in interval, in which case then you got to break it out. But I still would do the number line because it helps so much. All right, moving on. And then there's this one. Everybody give this one a try. I'll pause for a second. I'm going to give it a try. So this has got 4 parts, and they're just asking you to figure out, what if you stick in negative 5? So can I put negative 5 right into this top part? No, because it says x has to be, well, wait a minute. Yeah, I can, because it says x has to be less than 0 and negative 5 is less than 0. So I can do it. So I put it in to this function, and it says f of x is 2x. So it's 2 times negative 5 makes negative 10. Who in here had negative 10 on the first one? Okay, good. On the next one, you stick in 0. Well, if you stick in 0, it's only going to happen there. So then that's 0 minus 4 is negative 4. Is that what you guys got? Negative 4? Okay, good. Juhi, would you take the next one? If I put in 3, which one did you take? The top, middle, or the bottom one?
The middle.
And what'd you get?
I got 5.
You got 5 is correct. And the last one, f of 6. Claire, you got this?
The last one?
Yep.
I got 3.
All right. And I'm really glad you said that, because a lot of people say 3 and negative 3 because their teacher in the past messed them up on this and they thought there's 2 answers for the square root of 9. There isn't. Square root of 9 is just 3. When would there have been 2 answers? If it had been like x squared equals 9, that would give you 2 answers, but it's not, because there's 2 square roots of 9. Square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of x squared is the absolute value of x. And so that's why there's 2 answers. X equals 3, x equals negative 3. Okay, so that kind of problem has 2 answers. This kind of problem only has 1 answer. Just making sure you get that, because there's like a lot of kids who are well-meaning and like, oh, I thought this is kind where you get 2 answers. Nope. The square root problem doesn't just have 2 answers. The square root of a variable has 2 answers. Okay, moving on. Oh, that's it. Cool. So now this is the part where you can ask me questions about anything that you think could be on the test. And this is the time for the group. In a minute, we'll be done with group learning stuff, and then you can ask me individual questions. What topic would you like to talk about?
In the Schoology quiz, could you go over the domain of question 3?
Yes, domain. I'm going to start with a problem that's very similar. Let's say this is 10 and this is 12, and I'm shading between 10 and 12. That problem is a lot like this. And then there's another one where x is like, let's say x is 7. These are intersect questions. The black shaded area and the blue bar, do you get that they intersect right here? Sophia, is that the question? Is it kind of like that one?
No, so it's 64, y in parentheses.
Okay, but it is the same as this one, and that's what you're not catching. So if you look at that problem, the 64 comma whatever, when you graph it, it looks identical to this. That's why I just did this. So my coaching for you on that will be to graph that problem, and it'll look just like this, except it says x equals 64. See how there's a 64 on the front?
Yeah.
That means x equals 64. So it's like this, except I just put 7 here. Okay? So if you graph it, it'll look just like this. So try graphing it on paper, and then when you ask what's the domain and range of it, it'll go like this. And the reason I wanted it to be a different problem is because a lot of people have already done the quiz, and they're like, that's past history. So what if I said, what's the domain and range of this? Hint, you're going to want to know what this spot is, which is 10, comma 7. And you're going to want to know what this spot is. Oh, I'm wrong. It's not 10, comma 7. Sorry. 7, comma 10. And what's this spot? 7, comma 12. If that green bar is our function, first of all, it does not pass a vertical line test, so I know it's not a function. But what's its domain? I'm going to highlight the important part. That and that. What's the domain of that? Isn't the domain about the x's? So, what's the x here?
7.
What's the x here?
7.
Here?
7.
Here? Do you get the idea? X is always 7. Or in the problem line you were doing, this was a line at 64. X is always 64. So the domain on that one, it's just always 64.
I get that. I just didn't know how to write it in interval notation. Is it like 64, 0 or?
Good question. Okay, so if you just have one number, you can just say it's 64. Because like saying it's from 64 to 64, that's kind of clunky. You just say 64. All right, and then the y values here. What's the lowest it ever goes? And the highest it ever goes? 12. 10 to 12 is the range. So the domain is the x's, the range is the y's. All right, so that's a good general question. Now, I'd be happy to help anybody with their individual questions, like that one, in just a second when we're all done. Here's one other way that the domain and range could be asked. So let's try this. And make an empty spot right there. That'll make it add a little layer of trickiness. Let's say this is at 3, 7. Let's say this is at -1, 4. And let's say this is at 6, -2. What's the domain and range of this one? Domain goes left to right. Range is from low to high or down to up. You gotta always put them in order from small to big. Savino, what do you say? This is the domain on this one.
-1 bracket, comma, -2 bracket.
Close, but
Sorry,
no.
6 bracket.
All right, and you did well, except you didn't notice that as you were going from this to this, there was a spot right there
Oh,
that stopped working. So -1 to 3, and then it doesn't work at 3. There's an empty spot there. And then it starts working again at 3 and keeps working until you hit 6. Oh, wait, but it works at 6. Bracket. How many of you guys actually had the domain right? Oh, we should practice that then. All right, how about the range? Well, that's from low to high. What's the lowest this ever goes? -2. Touches -2. What's the highest it ever goes? It would have been this point, but it didn't quite touch it. So 7, but it doesn't touch it. Do you get why the domain doesn't touch 3? It's because of that hole. All right, I think we should do one more like that. Just at this random spot along here. The lowest spot it was at, and the highest spot it was at. The lowest spot it was at, and just want the range on this one. The lowest spot it was at -3, 1. Highest spot it was at was at 10, 5. It's a weird looking 10. So the range would be how low to how high. The lowest it ever was -3. And then along the way to the highest it ever was, wait a minute, I'm doing range, Mr. Server. 1 to the highest it ever was 5. You might think that this empty spot here means that it never existed at, oh, I gotta say what it was. Let's say this is at 5, 3. But look at how there was something here at that same level, like at that same height, And if I go over like here, there was something over here that existed. So this range, probably giving you one that's too hard here, but this range would be from -1 to 5, and it works because there are other things at this level, at the 3 level. This is the line for 3. There's other things that work there. So in this case, you could ignore the whole when it comes to the range. But the domain is from left to right. There's nothing that makes up for that whole on from left to right. So the domain would be -3, and then it goes until it hits 5, but it doesn't work at 5. And then it goes from 5 to 10. And it doesn't work there either. Yes?
Are the ranges not supposed to be bracketed?
No, because this 5, it never actually hits the height of 5. There's an empty spot there.
Yeah,
So it's a parenthesis. Oh, you're okay. I get what you're saying. You're saying mine has a bracket, and it should have a parenthesis. Yes, you're right. Oh, that whole problem was kind of a train wreck.
For the range,
Yes.
why don't you stop at 3 in between the two here for domain?
Because on the way from here, I'm going to do it on the thing here. This is the lowest we went, right? As we went and we hit this spot, you're right, there was an empty spot, but there was other spots that were defined, and so therefore it doesn't mean you can never be a height of 3. There were things that were a height of 3. Just this one spot didn't have a height of 3. So 3 was part of the range. There were things that had a height of 3, like this spot and this spot. That's why you didn't have to not work at 3. I probably shouldn't have showed you this one. This is more like calc level. That was a really hard one. All right, to get your confidence back, let's get a nice normal one in. -3, 6, 1, 7. Empty spot down there, only one empty spot, and it's at 8, -2. Find the domain and range of that one. Did have a few kids come in this morning to take their top 20. That's awesome. You can still take that until November 10th. And the stronger you get at that, I'm telling you, this test you're about to take Friday will have at least 3 problems where they're top 20 questions kind of right in the middle of everything. Your last test had like 3 too.
Thanks.
Take care. Okay, domain on this one goes from furthest left, -3, and since it's a filled-in circle, bracket, 2, since the 1, 7 was just a regular filled-in point, it doesn't stop it from working, so x keeps working all the way until 8. And then it never actually hits 8, though, parenthesis. Raise your hand if you had the domain right. Cool. Then the range is how low to how high. The lowest it ever went was -2, and did it actually hit -2? Did it ever touch that? No, so -2 with a parenthesis. What's the highest that it ever went? It's easy to look here thinking that's the end of the function, but it got higher right there. So 7, and that's a bracket because it touched 7 at its highest point. Okay, I want to leave some time, so that's all I have for the video for today. Be ready for the test tomorrow.